You have turned off your camera. You may now depart from the meeting. I was dismissed in the middle of Zoom while teaching the person they chose to take my position. In reality, nobody used the word fired. It was more akin to deleted. I had 42 people in the room, the slide deck up the screen shared, and I was in the middle of presenting a 3-year logistics plan that I had created from scratch. Everyone, including some regional managers and those in operations and procurement. Then, my camera abruptly stopped blinking. Just below interns and IT support, my name appeared at the bottom of the list of attendees. A pause. Then, as if to give me a refill, Haley's gentle and courteous voice could be heard. Nora, it appears that your segment is finished. You are free to drop if necessary. I remained silent. I was still on the final slide and just stared at my screen. The cold chain optimization model roadmap for 2024-2027, my roadmap. My plan. My voice. What about the next person to speak? Dylan owned it. With a confident tone and brand-approved intensity, he jumped right in as if this were a TED Talk. I saw him practically repeat my talking points verbatim. He even employed the identical metaphor that I had written down in the small notepad I kept by my espresso maker. In preparation, I had remarked, supply chains are like veins. When they are at work, you don't feel them. Only when anything clogs do you notice. He spoke more slowly, as if he had thought about it while hiking. No one winced. No one unmuted. No one returned my call. I then selected Leave Meeting. I shut down my laptop, leaned back, and I didn't feel anything for a moment. Not anger, not melancholy, simply hollow. When your body realizes the betrayal before your mind does, there's that numb quiet. I got up and went to the small area of my kitchen where I keep my ancient brass wind-up timer, which dings when you crank it and ticks softly, and my espresso machine. It has been with me for years. Despite its scratches and dents, I always touch it first, before a major plan or rollout. I selected 45 minutes on the dial. Not that I required a timer. However, it takes me 45 minutes to determine what is important and what is not. I then took a seat and listened. Tick, tick, tick. Dylan is being promoted to the fancy title of Director of Operational Innovation, suitable for the media. The ideal haircut, the ideal age, and the ideal vitality. And me, I've been transitioned to an advising position that doesn't include direct customer contact. We want your brain, but not your face, is what that means. I have 14 years of experience with cold span logistics. It's not some glitzy IT firm. This nationwide cold chain company offers temperature-sensitive transportation, refrigerated trucking, and warehouse optimization for everything from grocery store fruit to hospital blood units. We don't sell catchphrases. Our products are perishable, and I kept it going for more than 10 years. Not a single Ivy League degree. No resume that goes viral. Only a thorough understanding of systems' consistent problem solving and 100 fires that were silently extinguished before they ever made it to the boardroom. Dylan's has never rerouted a supply chain in the event of a Tulsa flood. After a warehouse power outage, no delivery region was ever fully restored. However, he talks like a podcaster and takes good selfies. I'm not resentful. I anticipated this. However, they are unaware, and Dylan is unaware, that I created a parallel routing methodology for our West Coast deliveries during last year's system update. When we were overdue on software contracts, I temporarily launched it under my own license. It was never updated. Additionally, that protocol is still in use. Half of their distribution is still operating without their legal team being aware of its whereabouts. A middle manager was not let go. The infrastructure was fired. I'll give it 45 minutes. After that, I'll make the final decision. I never desired attention. Just a place at the table where real work was done. We didn't even have a department for what I do today when I started working at Coldspan. I had nothing but a binder full of designs and a strange fixation with the transportation of frozen food across the nation when I was 27, fresh off a botched warehouse optimization project in Utah. Since there were no other applicants for the position, they didn't care where I attended school. The salary was minimal. The systems were malfunctioning. Still, I said yes. Back then, clipboards were still in use. Actual ones, with real pens that are fastened to threads. On my first day, I was requested to determine the reason behind the 17% increase in fuel prices in the Midwestern corridor. It had been 6 months since anyone had examined the routing software. It turned out that a map problem that no one had fixed was causing half the fleet to travel an additional 60 miles. Before lunch, I fixed it. Only 2 weeks later, when accounting reported that spending had suddenly decreased, did I even tell anyone. My first lesson about this company's operations was that if you put out a fire in a quiet manner, you were the person they trusted when the structure caught fire again. But since no one initially witnessed it burn, they never gave you credit. I didn't give a damn. Not initially, at least. I enjoyed being necessary without the commotion. Understanding the distinction between a typical delay and a system-wide leak was interesting to me. When individuals truly needed answers, I enjoyed being the one they called. They gradually increased my responsibilities, but never granted me a title. I created procedures, rewrote documents that no one read, and taught people. In order to minimize spoiling, I assisted in restructuring the trailer loading process. When things took a turn for the worse, I was airlifted to regional centers. However, my signature was never used in press releases. Shareholder decks never included my name. 5 years later, Dylan entered. He was gleaming from the beginning. Fresh off a logistics business that was acquired complete with gradient-adorned PowerPoints and buzzwords. Even after 12 hours of travel, his button-down still had the appearance of being dry-cleaned. Even after he reiterated what I had said 3 months prior, he was referred to as sharp. I didn't mind at first. Our personalities are different. I assumed he would take care of the stage while I remained in the background. Up until it didn't, it worked. It began modestly. After reformatting the spreadsheets and borrowing my models, he would display them with his name on the bottom tab. He would round down my figures in meetings to make them appear cleaner. Even though my approaches prevented freight from backing up in Texas when the freeway flooded, he informed the team they were a little dated. He didn't inquire about the routes. When a sensor failed to function, I never looked at the dashboards. However, he attended all executive meetings, one slide at a time. Then Haley arrived. She was a recently appointed VP of Operations with experience in aerospace supply chains and a keen mind. Despite their similar language and educational backgrounds, she and Dylan clicked right away. All of a sudden, calendar invites were not including me. I used to lead data reviews, but they were reorganized to start at 8 a.m. huddles about which I was not even aware. While I was left repairing truck reroute issues from the previous evening, I would pass the conference room and see them there beaming. No one informed me that I was being ejected. The problem is that they never mention it. They simply stop inquiring, stop involving you. They steal aspects of your work and transfer them to others, silently and slowly, till you end up working as support staff for a position you created. About 6 months before the Zoom event, I began to notice the changes. The projects I oversaw were repurposed. Reports lost credit. Using the exact model I had developed during peak season the previous year, Dylan was promoted for increasing load efficiency. And I continued working, since someone had to. However, as is customary, I stayed up late one night to review the system logs from our distribution pilot on the West Coast. I realized then that I owned the routing protocol we were employing. In a technical sense, I had constructed it during last winter's infrastructure breakdown, when our primary vendor system was unavailable for 9 days. I was eagerly awaiting IT. I therefore wrote a workaround. In order to avoid legal red tape, I registered it under my own development license. I kept a record of everything. It was not a secret. But after the crisis was over, nobody inquired about it. They simply continued to use it. And now 43% of the company's volume was being routed through a system that was housed on a server that I still had authority over. Ownership had not been transferred. Nobody had even considered asking. I remained silent. Not quite yet. Just now, I logged in, captured screenshots, tracked each request that Dylan's group sent via the system. Because if they desired for me to be invisible, then there would be quiet. This time, though, it would be more powerful than any invitation to a conference. Where they didn't look, the system is more than simply code, they always say. However, people forget its memory as well. I also recall every detail. Raphael, one of the site leads at our Fresno hub, sent me a voicemail 3 weeks after they forced me off camera. Every Monday we used to speak. He would tell me the truth, what the logs didn't reveal. Truck drivers waiting for clearance, broken refrigeration units, and missed windows all resulted from a procurement employee failing to update a vendor file. He sounded tight this time, though. Tense. I'm not sure if you're still involved, but something seems strange, Nora. The timing on the West Coast is completely off. Trucks are leaving according to sensors, but the manifest logs don't match. Dylan's team claims it's only a blip, but the Safeway contract is already penalizing us. I assumed you would be aware. I understood exactly what he was discussing. The manifest lag. If the routing server became disconnected from the main network, that would be the first thing that would go wrong. It also made sense because they hadn't yet re-registered the protocol to the company's infrastructure. The server's auto-rotate limit had been reached. It required a key refresh, which I alone had. They failed to remember that. They never inquired as to how the engine continued to run in their haste to polish the surface. I took a while to reply. I sat by it. Let the stillness speak for itself. I received an email 4 days later. Subject: urgent system timeout. From coldspanlogistics.com, IT admin body. The regional routing module for distribution zones, WC3 and WC4, is exhibiting persistent access failures. Do you still possess the legacy prototype's login credentials? No. Hello, Nora. No? I hope all is well with you. Panic cloaked in polite IT jargon. I didn't respond. I looked at the logs instead. The line had grown to almost 8,000 route requests. Trucks were being sent out without doing any last-minute checks. Gas was squandered, time was lost, and by the end of the week, inventory promises would be impacted. And still I didn't get a direct call. Not Haley, not Dylan. They were too preoccupied with controlling perception. They didn't bother to comprehend that I was in charge in the meantime. Yes, I still had hard copies of my notes, so I looked through them. Every protocol patch was printed. Every update log from the switchover to the cold system. A hidden line in the override script indicated that my private key was still active, so I located the one I required. Still verified. Mine yet. I pulled the override trigger after logging into the server that same day. Not to cause any damage, to put it on hold. Soft sleep is what I have the system configured to. Not a collision. Nothing but silence. It wouldn't have been an error if someone had closely examined the system dashboard. A hold was placed. The road was about to twist, and it felt like someone was waiting to see who noticed. The Fresno location reported 10 missed opportunities in 18 hours. 12 was flagged by LA. Regional grocery companies began to voice their complaints. Why is your delivery timing incorrect? Your trailers have been circling for hours. Why then the actual message arrived? From Haley this time. Hello, Nora. I hope all is okay with you. We've observed a few anomalies on the West Coast pilot. I would appreciate your advice and was just wondering if you might have time for a brief phone conversation. There is no pressure. There is no pressure. Correct. I didn't return the call. Not quite yet. Rather, I quietly updated a secret professional forum where I have been active for years. The community is logistics. I didn't mention names, but it was a brief article on the risk of proprietary protocols in enterprise settings when infrastructure owners are left out of transition planning. However, the comments blazed. They made guesses. Individuals shared. One comment caught my attention. This company seems to have forgotten who built their foundation. That's right, because they forgot the system didn't care about optics when they were out posing with spotless graphs and control rooms that looked good enough to post on Instagram. Logic was important to it. Order. Time. When a line broke at 2 a.m, hands that knew what to do. At last, I responded to Raphael, told him the truth. Not really dramatic. Just be truthful. The system has stopped. A credential update is required. Only if the proper individuals get in touch and stop acting as though this wasn't the result of silent labor will I re-engage. One sentence was written back by him. I'm going to assume that nobody even recognized it as yours. That's right, as they didn't inquire. However they were going to. You chose the paint over the foundation. At last, they gave me a call. This time it was a real phone call on a Tuesday morning shortly after 9, rather than an email or message. I waited for it to ring twice before responding. Haley's voice emerged calm and beautiful, yet with a tight edge. Hello, Nora. Thank you for answering the phone. I believe we might have failed to notice a routing protocol dependency. I remained silent. For a moment longer than was comfortable, I let her sit in the silence. With your assistance, we would like to investigate ways to restore complete functionality. She continued neutral. They are still making an effort to portray this as a minor correction, rather than a complete mess that they caused. Then she handed Dylan the phone. He was on the line, but I was unaware of it. He spoke more softly than usual. Less theatrical. Hi, Nora. I simply wanted to express how much I admire everything you've created, and we might have hurried the transition, in my opinion. I exhaled sharply through my nose. Not quite a giggle. Calmly and slowly, I said, You didn't rush it. You didn't do it. You took shortcuts on something you didn't comprehend. He didn't dispute, which, to be honest, was the best move he had made since the beginning of this whole situation. Then, albeit not in the manner I had anticipated, I heard the words I had been waiting for. We would like to rehire you, possibly as a consultant. We're considering a temporary advisor for systems. High visibility. Clean contract. Consultant. Like a present, they believed I would like the word lingered in the air. I responded, You mean you want me to quietly fix the issue, and then vanish once the next round of promotions rolls around? Dylan began to stumble. No. All we want is, I interrupted him. Dylan, you decided on the paint instead of the foundation. You're shocked to learn that the walls are crumbling now. A pause occurred. Long actual. Haley turned back on. Nora, we may discuss compensation, fairness, title, anything necessary to bring the system under control. However, I no longer wanted any of that, as I had previously made something else stable. I posted in the logistics forum, right? Operations professionals had discreetly taken to it. Some regional partners made direct contact. I was given the opportunity to oversee the infrastructure rebuild for one of them, Greenspan Freight, a rival with a strong ethical record. Complete independence, complete visibility, a team that I created from the ground up. What's the best part? They wanted more than simply what I was aware of. They desired my way of thinking. I promised Haley I would give it some thought. Before they could push any farther, they hung up. I made one final login to the routing server that afternoon. I wrote an email after backing up all the configurations and exporting a clean shutdown report to Dylan Grover, Haley Marsh, and IT leadership subject report on legacy protocol termination, Effective right away, system transition, summary version, logs and legal memorandum, attached body. I have disabled my old protocol utilized in West Coast routing operations in accordance with Article 2.4 of the Software Access Agreement. A new deployment strategy is now needed for the infrastructure. Liability disclaimers and data recovery options are attached. I wish you luck. Leighton Nora. Not a threat. Don't be offensive. Just the facts. Since they did not own the system. It didn't. I constructed it, and I had finished giving it away for free. I brewed a fresh cup of espresso that evening, set the brass timer for 45 minutes, and let the tick-tick-tick fill the room. There was no meeting. There was no report for it. It served as a simple reminder of the passage of time, the shattered silence, and the consequences of believing that performance equals power. It isn't. It is a memory. It's the design. When everything is smoldering, it's the hand that understands which wire not to cut. And they had discovered that at last. The difficult way. You decided to use paint instead of foundation. You find yourself standing in a house that is unable to support itself. The room that did not receive any applause. I didn't rejoice. I didn't write anything about it. My LinkedIn profile was not updated. My neighbor kept asking if I worked for one of those fancy shipping apps, so I didn't even tell him. Rather, I gathered the necessary files, put my badge back in a simple packet, and left Coldspan in silence exactly as I had entered 14 years before. No cake, no applause, no farewell email. However, I didn't feel erased this time. I was satisfied. After 3 weeks, I entered a new building that was calmer, smaller, and very different from the corporate tower that Coldspan had dubbed headquarters. It served as the Spokane Regional Center for Greenspan Freight. No walls made of glass, no predetermined branding, just a space with whiteboards, comfortable chairs, and individuals who were concerned about completing the work correctly. Director of Structural Logistics Innovation is the actual title they gave me. A little mouthful. They should abbreviate it, I said. All we need is someone who knows what not to break, they added, and that I could do that. I brought very little with me. Only a little box, my work laptop, and a few old printouts. The brass wind-up timer was in the package. It's still ticking. Mine yet. I set it next to the window in the corner of my new desk, where the afternoon sun shone just enough to give the ancient copper a slight shine. It was spotted on the first day by my new crew. "What is that thing for?" one of them said. I was honest with them, that I can tell when I'm thinking clearly in this way. When I start something, I turn it. Usually I have everything I need by the time it dings. In the office, it turned into a joke. Perhaps it's time to wind the Nora clock, they would say whenever someone bumped into a wall. The problem is that it was successful. In reality, they were telling you to take a deep breath, pay attention to the silence, and have faith in your own intuition. Although I never returned to Coldspan, Raphael informed me that they had been compelled to hire a third-party company to reconstruct the system I had destroyed. On the weekends and after hours, they spent about 7 figures attempting to replicate what I had constructed. Whatever it implies, Dylan was moved into a brand strategy role. Haley completely departed. I wasn't proud of it. I wasn't depressed either. It just made sense. For power is not about appearances. It's about what endures when they turn away. Throughout the winter, I kept the timer running. Not because I had to keep track of time. However, it served as a reminder that I had always been the one to set the pace. I was no longer merely responding to a system that I had previously defended. I was creating one in which no one's voice had to struggle to be heard, where every path and rollback had a purpose, and where credit didn't disappear into slide decks. And perhaps that was the main goal. Not retaliation, not acknowledgement. All I need is permission to rebuild on my own terms. They will eventually need what you carry quietly. Sometimes I think about that timer. What it meant, not only how it sounded, or how the brass remained warm beneath my fingers on chilly evenings. Time management was never an issue. It has to do with being there. In a firm that attempted to float away on image and jargon, it was how I managed to stay grounded, how I silently reassured myself that I still had something tangible to cling to, regardless of how noisy the room became. I'm frequently asked how I knew when to leave. I didn't. I simply realized that I couldn't continue to give what I had created to individuals who had no idea how well it was holding up. They believed they had removed a portion at cold span. However, the axis around which everything revolved had been removed. They were perplexed and wondered what had changed as everything came to a standstill. However, I was aware. Since I had been the one maintaining the rhythm the entire time, I knew. Not for the praise, not for attention, just so it worked. And now I work more slowly, more intelligent. Before making important decisions, I still set the timer for 45 minutes. Not by habit, because I appreciate what I've learned, what I've preserved, and what no one else can take away from me. If anyone is listening here, is the lesson I would impart. You don't get real power from them. It's what you keep hidden until they discover they can't function without it. Applause is not necessary for you. The headline is not necessary. When the slide deck stops and the camera turns off, all you need to know is who you are. That's the beginning of your power. I'll ask you this now. What have you been keeping hidden for years that no one has noticed yet? Without it, everything would crumble. Share your tale in the space provided here. Someone has to realize that they are not the only one maintaining the status quo.